Lyle.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the May 21st, 2026 Warren County LPC meeting. Call our meeting to order. First action is to review the April 23rd meeting minutes. If everybody's had a chance to review those, do have a review from the CFO for April 2026 financials.
Good morning. So for the LDC April financials, the financials in the packet, the fund balance currently stands at just over 1.5 million bucks, 1,570,000. It's up $7 from last month. Just up.
Eagle.
So our cash balance is 316,000. Our accounts receivable is a little over 21,000. Most of that is due from the county. I actually didn't have Nate and Mike around to sign both checks, so without us getting paid, we can't get reimbursed. Loan receivable is just under 450,000. The CD investments are 906,000. We gained, it's a little bit lower now than it has been in the prior months, but it's a little over $1,000. It's $1,191. Our accounts payable are 8,800. That's a little more than I had budgeted for the audit. I budgeted 7,500, so it's a little higher. Other current liabilities, we have none. Everything's or designated fund hasn't changed. So it stands at 332,000. I am not transferring the interest that we've gained from CDs until the end of the year. So it does have the additional gains from CDs, which I don't have the number. Actually, I could get the number for you, what it's been for the year. Because only some of the CDs I know. Monthly, I get this report. The rest of the CDs, I won't know what the gains are until they mature. Statement of activities for March 2026. Our income is 8,391. Our expenses are 5,517. It's a little bit under. Our year-to-date income is 34,128, and our year-to-date expenses are under. They're 26,581. They're under by 8,000. A lot of that is our programming.
So let me just make sure you know that I think we will spend into that. It just is a timing issue. We've had much more legal dialogue over the last month or two about the mechanics of some of our loans and their status. That will be some of that. And then I'll talk to you about some of the events that we have planned on the entrepreneurial side that will likely chew into get us back online.
Are there any questions about financials? So we're, hopefully, if these are approved. We also need to approve last month's because we just forgot to approve them.
Do you want to review the loan portfolio first? Or?
Some of it. So annual reporting, all the loans have a stipulation that they must provide annual reporting for the 1st of May. Most of our loan recipients are on extensions for the taxes. So I'm collecting the letters to just confirm that. And the annual, but they still can provide their financial reporting. It's been inconsistent. I think some of that we might talk about in the executive session.
Well, I mean, we can talk about just the process. For a number of years, this was also inconsistent in terms of how we collected it. The timing and communication process was not consistent from year to year. The last couple of years has been consistent. Deanna has put that in place. What we find is it's getting harder and harder every year to get prior year financials, even though we've given them until May to do that, you would think that at that point they would. But generally what's happening is that
The scope of the project has changed. It's a new build. Is it a new build? There's no.
essentially all he's doing is modifying his proposed site plan. Because it had 2 retail spaces and now it's going to be all housing and there's some modification of that affects the site plan. I don't think it triggers for us a modification because the building itself is still in process and it was housing was the basis by which we lent the funds. I'll make sure from Karen that that's the case. So, sure. A number of things have happened since I last saw you. I'm a member of the Innovate 518, advisory board, which is all of the capital districts, entrepreneurial entities kind of get together roughly every 6 weeks. That meeting was, the most recent meeting was yesterday. That conversation is oftentimes not valuable to us because the incubator activity and traditional entrepreneurial activity that's associated in Albany is associated with UAlbany, RPI, even Hudson Valley in a much larger kind of traditional way. Like they have on-campus incubators that have 20+ student-driven startups operating outside. So I don't oftentimes report to you on what happens there, but there's a couple of things happening in this space. First is that I was notified during Adirondack Day by the Adirondack Community Fund that they, together with the Cloud Splitter organization, had funded an entrepreneurial effort in the park. It was largely driven by a donation from a former Pepsi executive who is attempting to cultivate a high-tech innovation hub in the Adirondack Park, which sounds very, very ambitious to me. However, they have a full-time coordinator. Her name is Svetlana, holding a series of events. I'm going to Bob and I together are going to their next one, which is next week in Elizabethtown. From looking at the materials from the previous meetings, they have between 20 and 30 entrepreneurs who are working on startups that are technology-based startups in the park. When I dig deeper at this, it appears that most, if not all of them, are AI-oriented projects. So what seems to be happening is that people who have knowledge of a particular industry are developing AI tools, extensions, or products that allow people to use AI in that particular application or industry. So for instance, there are many, more than one, I shouldn't say many, that are traditional advertising agency and marketing agency oriented things. AI has really had a big impact in that field. But it's not to create creative stuff. It's to create prototypes of customers and to predict consumer behavior using AI. We actually reviewed the business plan of one who asked for our input. While they're based in the Lake Placid area, their view was they didn't have anybody who could give them advice on a business construct standpoint. And so they were referred to us. I was happy to look at it. The reason I'm telling you this is I was surprised by this. We don't generate tech startups typically here in Startup ADK. I think in the 5 years that I've been in this role, I've seen 1 or 2 out of the more than 50 that we've built business plans around. This would be a very significant new wave of activity. I think Bob and I want to go take a look at, number one, is it real? Number two, we had a phone call with Svetlana and talked about potentially creating a common event so that we would be able to have the current slot maybe come down further on the Northway, but still be in the park, but be in the park in Warren County and see if we could elicit any that may be in Warren County that are not currently got their hand up see if we could put them together to make an even bigger community. And I said, they were surprised by this because that's as much software activity as they have in Albany. So first I want to be clear. I don't know that there's 20 plus of these. I know that there's a handful. And I have seen a credible example or two of ones that really are attempting to build a product, a company, or a service, and that are seeking funding and would be in this kind of sector. If this actually has this kind of momentum, I think it would alter the approach that we would take. We would want to make sure we included it. We want to make sure that we collaborate with them, because I think they don't have the kind of startup infrastructure or an EDC to act as a resource. They just have a benefactor who's gathering them together every month to talk. I think there's a good marriage here potentially. So I've asked Bob to he had proposed a series of events. I asked him to hold off 1 week so that we could go to this other event and determine whether or not, if this community is as robust as it sounds, we would want to include them in what we're trying to do. But either way, we're going to hold an event in June. And it's going to be based on Startup 80K alumni. Anybody who's ever expressed an interest in startup activity to our office, or anyone else that we are aware of that might be interested, and I think that mail list is between 50 and 100. We're trying to construct a more robust mail list, and in fact, to talk to Melanie about whether or not there are people that are associated with the Common Roots Foundation that they might be aware of, and we're trying to reach out to different groups to see if we can build a bigger audience. But in the month of June, we will have an event. Whether or not it includes this group from the North Country, I still don't know the answer and won't know until next week. But that's a really encouraging sign to me. It'll be a relatively small scale event. By that I mean I'm expecting maybe 50 people that would come to whatever we host. We're trying to figure out the right venue. We'll certainly invite everyone here so that you're aware of it. Put it on your calendar. We'd welcome you if you wanted to come. The construct of the event will be insightful. It might be the process by which New York State incentives are going to be released and any insight we have to them. That's one topic we've considered. Another is a case study or two of the kind of things that are being developed in the area that might intrigue people. But that will be one element of the event. The other will be polling them to ask them some questions about what they need, what they see as gaps in their resources or knowledge base that would help them, how often they would like to meet, what kind of material they'd like to cover in the future, those kind of questions, and then some social component. So it would last maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. We would cover those three things, and we would try to start to develop a rhythm on that, where we might be 2 or 3 more during the course of the year. We're going to do it with or without these guys in the north, but if there's an opportunity to include them in it, I think we would want to make sure we take the time to do it. Bob has developed at least a schedule of these events, and I'll share that with all of you as soon as we kind of start to put dates to it. But the idea here is that we would gather entrepreneurs for 2 or 3 events, and then we would have at least 1, maybe 2 other events that are for a community that maybe goes beyond the entrepreneurs. So for instance, there has been a lot of interest in AI and the kind of activities that may be creating, or opportunities that that's creating. Bob is researching whether or not there are case studies or examples that we can bring to bear of people who are doing things in AI that would be willing to share them. So anyway, there's a lot of work that's been going on there, and I'll share the timeline and date for this next event, but it's likely to be in the 3rd or 4th week of June before the 4th.
Gotcha.
Well, we're trying to find the right venue. SUNY doesn't always do this for free. And so it may be that it makes sense for us to do that somewhere else. We'll let you know. We're actually meeting with Anastasia's on our board, the new president. We're meeting with her on a different topic, but we could also talk to her about what she sees as the role she wants the college to play and this kind of thing at the same time. There's been a significant wave of new entrepreneurs on South Street. And if you follow social media and your algorithm has you tied to Glens Falls, you're probably getting some of it. The downstairs, the Boba Tea Shop had its soft opening last night, and its full grand opening will be tomorrow. This is a really important thing. This is a couple who had a successful business like this in Plattsburgh and decided to open another operation here. If you read the Chronicle today, they talk about the fact that this place is exciting and caught their attention. Kara McGulihan has opened up Hometown down the street, and she has a pretty significant following on TikTok. And the TikTok I saw her do yesterday featured many other businesses that were on South Street. So she literally, walked up and down the street and gave people a sense of what the energy was. I think there's an opportunity here for us to try to engage that community, to try to figure out, number one, what brought them here, but number two, maybe what have they learned in the process that they would like to provide to us so that more might follow. And some of that we've already begun to elicit. There's been a lot of confusion about the process to engage, for instance, the city in planning and codes, and it's even more in flux now because the question of whether the city's doing it or the county's doing it is open-ended. But there's also the process of what qualifies as something that would have to go before a planning board. I think we might be able to help bring some awareness to these issues that are not just a particular person and their application, but maybe the experience of the last year on South Street that would help inform us as we continue to try to develop, not only in downtown Glens Falls, but just in general in the area. I'm very curious about the perception that they have about how we are relative to other places when it comes to essentially getting something off the ground and started here. And this is not specific to the city or even the county so much as it is what is the perception of us as a place to do business. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do that. One way that we may do is we're going to create an advisory body for the EDC board. And that advisory body is essentially people who are not full board members, but we believe could provide important voice from parts of the economy that maybe aren't represented on the board. And most of these small businesses or entrepreneurs that are working out of their home fit that category. So we've started to create a working list of now more than 10 potential names that we would gather maybe quarterly to gather their input. When we do that, I think it will be helpful for us as an LDC to review that just as much as the EDC board. The EDC board will look at that in terms of how might the EDC itself adapt to be more helpful there. But I think for us, is there an opportunity for some of our funds in a targeted way to be helpful here? Maybe much more specific. But we will have more about that, I think, in the month of June. I think that's everything in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. There is some question about whether or not startup will continue in its current form because everything at the college is in review right now. And we're going to continue to monitor that situation. If it appears as if startup in its format now is maybe not going to continue, we would have to sit down with the Washington County LDC and try to figure out what would we do to try to continue that. I think there's a number of options we could explore, but it's important to note that no one has told me from the college that they're not going to do it, only that we know that everything is under review and the staff that supported it are in transition. So there's enough for us to maybe try to develop a contingency plan to make sure that we could continue to do this if we needed to. If we were to do that, I'm not so sure that we would do it exactly the way that it's being done now. I think we would probably take a step back and say, especially based on the feedback that we're getting from small business people and new people in our community, Sound like you look like you had something there about to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say something about the previous topic, the planning boards and municipal governments being a pain in the ass.
Well, listen, I went through it, and anybody who's ever been through a business understands it, and you don't generally care about it until you're in it. But I'll tell you one thing that is difficult for businesses, and it's always been difficult, is that planning boards run on a monthly schedule and businesses don't. And when you have to go from month to month, when there's either a question or a change, that has significant impact. And I will be interested to see, because I don't want to tell people what they feel or think, but I know that the experience of some of the vendors who have come and talked, or the new storefront owners, have shared with us the frustration of preparing for an opening day, which you have to prepare for long in advance before you necessarily have all your approvals. And then finding out that not only did you not get to the answer on the day that they came, but now you have to wait another month before you can. And in particular, this has got an impact around their ability to hire. Because if they've hired people contingent on them starting on that day, and they're not able to start them on that day, they're likely to lose them. I don't think this is in any of our interest. And I think we got to figure out a way to perhaps be a little more nimble here. But that's just the beginning. I think the question of whether or not the fee structures are reasonable and in line with what other communities might charge, or what the appropriate value for that is an open-ended one. And then what in and of itself would trigger it or require it. For instance, the conversation has been raised to me a number of times that if there is a change in use, does that automatically trigger a planning board? Or would that necessarily mean that somebody would have to challenge that change in use would have a site implication? Because to go before the planning board costs you $750, even if they determine that they have no impact.
I think that happened with Queen of Hearts when they moved into the old cut above on Lafayette. Julie spent tens of thousands with going to the planning board, and it was commercial, but it was a different use. And really lamented even the impervious surface in the back and things like that.
Well, so for instance, down the street, Chris Patton went and took his entire building through the planning board, and there were 6 retail spaces that were laid out in that planning board. And then several of those businesses had to then turn around and bring their own enterprise, which had no change whatsoever in the physical construct of the facility. They had taken up residence there, they had signed a lease, and then they had put the planning board. I think they questioned that. Our voice here, this is not for us to say, we think the city or the county or in Queensbury should change their policy. It's to bring voice to the experience that people are having and to make sure that this is the balanced approach we want to take.
The Queensbury planning board is looking at 4 months right now. If you want to first get in front of them, like you said, heaven forbid there's a mistake or something, or it goes to the ZBA.
But there's issues on all sides of this, because you want to make sure that you're managing things and are aware of things in the public's interest. I completely get that. So what we want to do is just make sure that, particularly given that we have a unique wave of this is almost like a special 6 to 12 month period where we have all these new storefronts that are essentially opening up in Glens Falls. And we're seeing a significant amount of activity in Queensbury as well. Is this still is this still going to be the best way to do this? I think the LDC could have a role in that. Definitely the EDC will have a role in that, and we'll share with you more as we learn more. I think that's everything I've got for this. I do want to suggest to you that there is a reason for us to go into executive session to discuss potential proposed, pending, or current litigation with one or more owners.
Before we do that, can I go back to that AI stuff you were talking about? What brought them to this area? I mean,
They wanted to be in this area.
but, isn't it like there's not a lot of resources for them up in those areas?
Yeah, so I think what happens is that people move here and then decide, how am I going to make my way here? Or they may have moved here as a remote employee or a retiring employee, and then what I saw was exactly that. They came here with the advice that this is an opportunity for them. Job that they could do remotely, that job ended, and they didn't want to leave, so then they figured maybe I should just try to do my startup from there.
I hear all these things, especially on our board, everybody's leaving New York, and then I hear you come up with this, and they're going to like outpost in New York State, and want to start a business out there. It says to me, well, not everybody's leaving New York then.
Well, I'm going to tell you what my data says. My data says that for as long as we've been collecting the data, people from New York City have been going to Florida to retire. And that wasn't always for tax benefits, that was for lifestyle. But Florida was built with people from New York City essentially taking up coastal residence there for a part, if not all, full-time in their retirement. That phenomenon is not new. What has happened is people moving sooner than that or changing their nexus of where they are a resident based on tax inequity. So if you're running a business out of your home that's essentially aligned with you and your residence, it makes more sense for that to be based in a different tax state than it does to be in New York. That has definitely occurred in the period of time that I've been here, but I wouldn't say that it is the dominant force in those numbers, it is just in them. Here's what counterbalances that. There are people who are coming here primarily from urban environments, not just New York City. So sometimes it's Philadelphia, sometimes it's Washington, DC, sometimes it's Boston. But they have a connection and an attraction, particularly to the Adirondacks, and they decide they're going to choose lifestyle here, and then they try to figure out how to make their living here. The third thing that definitely happens here is that there is inflow or outflow to communities based on its perceived attractiveness. Saratoga went through this for more than 20 years, where they doubled their size over that period of time, basically by creating a sense that this was an attractive place to move to. That was primarily in-state, because people from other parts of New York that took up residence here. Glens Falls is experiencing some piece of this, and the Adirondacks are experiencing some piece of this. Jim McKenna and I from Roost did a study at the advent of COVID. So the EDC together with Roost co-sponsored the study. And we asked more than 80,000 people who had ever created an email trail for us to follow, whether they would ever consider moving to the Adirondacks, and if they did, what would be the factors that would weigh in on that. In 2 weeks, we got more than 7,000 responses, which is nearly 10% of the people we asked. There was no money in it, there was no prize, there was no nothing. You just filled out a 6-page survey. And I was shocked at that response. Of those 7,000, 25% said we already did this or we're in the process of doing it. Another 25, somewhere in there, said we're considering it along with several other places. Now, this was during COVID, so I think we have to essentially adjust for that. But they said that the single biggest drive was the fact that the perceived cost of living and quality of life here was better than where they were. And the single biggest issue was the lack of housing to purchase. It wasn't the price, because to them, affordable was anything under $450,000. We asked them about how to phrase that. If you're coming from Long Island or Westchester County, $450,000 does not sound like an expensive home. But at that time, it was more than twice what the median home price was in our area. The reason I share all that is like that's not new. That's 5 years old that people have been flowing this way. The entire throttle on that is how much housing we make available to them. I don't know of any housing development that has been built north of Albany that has not filled up after it was built. I don't think there has been any vacancy or there's not been dramatic shifts in how long a house stays on the market. But you know, as a realtor, sometimes people price it in a way that it's going to stay on the market for a while. It's not priced properly.
I am amazed at what's happening with the prices. Every house that comes on usually goes for more than it's listed for. And you bid, you have numerous people trying to get those houses. So it doesn't surprise me, but you know, when I kind of hear this, everybody's moving out. In the interview, she mentioned that, you know, someone said, why are you here? She said, we moved here for quality of life. So I think that's a big part of this, is we do have a nice quality of life. We have pretty much safe. We have very good school systems. We offer an array of stuff, like you've got the college. But I think, when you're talking about this person down the road here, why they're gonna locate here, you've got all these apartments now. But now you've got out on Corinth Road, they're gonna do a medical thing. They've got web. There's a lot of stuff happening here, and, so I think that's a big portion of it. But it just, I was wondering, when you go that far north and you're gonna start, businesses, that just amazes me. Because like we always hear,
I'm shocked.
no internet, no cell coverage.
I am shocked too. It did not seem real to me when somebody said there are 20 people developing either a software or a high technology product in the park. I'm like, how? Like, what are they grabbing onto? And I think it speaks to some degree of how accessible people think it is to do. It's not a function of coding anymore. It's a function of domain knowledge. The coding, essentially AI has displaced. So you can figure out how to turn it into a product if you know what it is, the idea that you're trying to crystallize, in a way that you weren't able to do even a few years ago. I think that's what's there. I'm gonna go find out. I mean, that's the hypothesis. But I think the question we should be asking ourselves is, what is the ideal community size for the county or for any particular municipality in it? And what would it take in order for us to achieve that? Because I think it's very reasonable for us to decide we want to be, in the case of Glens Falls, for instance, I've asked every mayor for the last 4, what's the ideal size of Glens Falls? I've never gotten a straight answer. But I said, well, how about this? Do you want the school to be a Class B school? Would you like it to stay open and not be consolidated with Queensbury someday? If you don't want that, then you have to have this amount of students. And today's demographics suggest that you might not. And so we would have to be able to bring in a certain number of people of a certain age. And then we would have to project that says, if we brought in a certain number of people under the age of 40, what's the typical family size and how many of them actually have kids, and then model that. But it would take, for us to increase the class size at Glens Falls by 10 to 20 students, it would take us adding hundreds of new families every single year to do that, which we are in the midst of doing now. But I think the question of whether or not we will continue to try to figure out how to do that, and can we even figure out how to do that, is a one we have to answer as a community. The demographics are clear though. If we don't bring in people, significant number of people, measured in 4 digits, things in more than 1,000, for instance, in Glens Falls, and measured in several thousand in Warren County. Our median age is aging in place. Today it is probably crossed 50, and since the last time we got the numbers, it was 49 point something the last time we did it, which means in 10 years, our median age will be 60 unless we bring in enough people to bring that number down. And I just always ask people, is that a community that you think will thrive? Do you think you have enough workforce to do even basic things like run restaurants in a hospital, if more people are Medicare eligible than not? That ultimately frames the question of, well, what would we want to be and what would it take? I will say we are in a better position than we've ever been. The pipeline in Queensbury is measured in hundreds of units. Joe Gross says 400 on Lake George. We met with him the other day. He has residential property that he's looking to put into play as either subdivisions or individual homes. The number of building permits that were issued for both dense and single family homes in Warren County was at a 10-year high last year. So I think we are stepping into it. I think what we have to do is figure out, well, where do we want it to go? And how do we steer it? But people are registering with their feet. If they're fighting to either stay here or come here to do things that we would never even imagine, then we don't have to worry about whether we have to talk them into it. We just have to imagine, do we want them?
In the paper today about the new Dunkin' Donuts going up there next to 20, did you see that? Someone wants to build another plaza. And one of the, I don't know if it was zoning or planning board member, she's like, well, we've got one big empty building here, it doesn't look good for us, now you wanna build another one and you think you're gonna fill it. And I kind of was like, yeah, you know, she's kind of right, if you see empty spaces like that, and it's been empty for a long time, I think, I don't know who owns it. It's right against the log jam. And it's been vacant since they built it. So, you know, she brought that up, and I was thinking, yeah, you know, that's an interesting point there too, but.
Renovating a building is oftentimes more expensive than building it from scratch.
Well, it's there,
I
it's
don't
already built. So, I don't know, I understood that too. But the other thing that I just noticed was the school board votes, or the school budget votes today. There was only one school in this area that voted their budget down, and that was Cambridge. And I was surprised to see that, because I thought Cambridge has a lot going for it. There's another place that if they spend some money on their downtown area, they could start to flourish, because it's a nice little area, and it's,
Do you know that Cambridge has a small business incubator?
do they?
I didn't know it till yesterday. A entrepreneur moved there and started one. It's a shared workspace downtown, and he has not only people from that area, but he has people moving up from RPI and New Albany to sit there. He's made it attractive enough for them to drive from Albany to place themselves there.
If I wasn't here, I wouldn't know all this wonderful information.
Well, I want to make sure that we as an LDC stay abreast of this so we can figure out what role is appropriate for us to play. And I do think the pre-development fund has already benefited somebody who started down that road, had a change and where it was able to weather it. I think there are 2 or 3 other, I think, likely applicants that we will see during the course of the year that we're working with now. And Beth is basically from the Champlain Lake George Planning Board putting a similar program out in the greater park. And quite honestly, you might ask, well, you know, if she's doing it, why would we do it? But ours is slightly different. We have the ability to do it on the Glens Falls Queensbury side of the blue line as well as inside the blue line. Her program is programmed solely for other side of the blue line. I don't think it's a bad idea for people to have 2 choices in that particular case.
Motion to go into executive session. Ms. Chandler? Mr. McDevitt, any discussion? All in favor of going into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?